This podcast is really about the kind of nine box grid as a mechanic. What is it and why do organizations use it? For those that are not familiar with this.
The question is from Thinking Focus.
Hi, I'm Ricky.
Hi, I'm Paul.
And today the question is, how do you work out who your talented people are? Well, this is the one I've been really looking forward to.
Yeah, and I think it's a really sort of fascinating little explanation we can have here, because instead of going, how do you do it to start with, let's kind of talk about the elephant in the corner of why it's really hard. And the reason it's really hard is because if I know you, if we've been working together for a while, actually the question that I end up answering 90% of the time when I answer, is person X any good? Isn't the are they any good question. It's the do I like them question.
Yes, and if I say something that they don't like, will they no longer like me?
Yes. But it works both ways because, you could be going, that person is incredibly good at their job. I think they're a bit of a dick. Therefore, I'm going to pretend they're not incredibly good at their job because I don't quite like them or they rub me up the wrong way. And so, like most things we talk about, the state of your mindset, are you judging this through an emotional or system one or a chimp or whatever you want to call it lens, or are you taking a much more rational view of the situation and looking at it through a lens that says, I'm not going to answer the question, do I like them? That's actually irrelevant to the talent conversation. I mean, it might play some place in it, I guess, because do they fit? But really, it's the question I need to answer is about delivery and potential, not about how I feel about them.
And this podcast is really about the kind of nine box grid as a mechanic for trying to unlock this. I think, I've had a number of conversations with clients recently, because at the time of recording this is a hot topic because where we are in the time of the year, it's early 2023. And lots of organizations are doing their routine maintenance, if you like, in terms of, well, who have we got and how good are they type questions. And I remember you and I a couple of weeks back had a conversation about this, and I really liked the way in which you kind of framed it, and we'll get on to that. But I think step one is going, what is it and why do organizations use it? For those that are not familiar with this.
So let's start with what is it? Nine box grid is basically I was going to say a 2x2, but it's not. It's a 3x3. But it's the same concept. It's a rational thinking tool. It's taking two parameters and causing us to break a decision down. In this case, about individuals, the people in your team, by using two parameters. So instead of going, are they any good? Yes, no. You're going, here are two completely separate scales that look at very different things. And if I use those two parameters, it's going to cause me to be more rational. And this is like a lot of the critical thinking tools that we use. It just happens to be a very popular one, particularly in HR circles, because it's been around a long time.
And I think it's worth pointing out there's lots of different variants of these.
Yeah.
There is no one size fits all here. People have adapted this, they've adjusted it, they've amended it, so it kind of fits their view on the world.
Yes. But at the heart of it, you're asking two key questions and you're just grading a whole group of people against these two key questions. And those two key questions have three potential answers each. And therefore you end up with 9 possible outcomes. That's a 9-box grid. And typically, if you've never seen one, you draw it on a piece of paper. It's a 3x3 grid. And the box that somebody fits in then enables you to see that person in a slightly different light and manage them in a slightly different way. So let's talk about the two. And I think what we need to do is we'll stick a picture of this on the website and put a link in the description, because I think if you can visualize it, much the better. But let's talk about the two criteria here. So the first criteria is about performance. So this is, to me, is the today criteria. Is the person delivering against the expectation? three answers. So the middle answer is yes, they're delivering against the expectation. The answer to the left, lower than middle, is no, they're not delivering against the expectation. They're underperforming. And the answer to the right is they're overperforming. Now, I think it's worth talking about what those two mean. So, you could be really black and white about this and saying somebody who is performing exactly hit their target. Their target was to develop 100 widgets. They did 100 widgets.
Let's not overcomplicate this, is what you're saying. I think that basically says you had a goal,
Yeah.
you either hit that goal bang on, or you went over that goal, in which case you exceeded, or you fell short of that goal. There is no, y- it is what it is. That's how you.
Yeah. And I think all of us are going to be reasonable about this. If you've got somebody who did 99 widgets because the machine blew up, and we all knew the machine blew up, and there's a very justifiable reason to then go they're underperforming, I think is just being a bit
Yeah, of course.
mean spirit. It's Scrooge behavior,
Well,
isn't it?
I think that's where that good old fashioned common sense might apply in that
I
situation.
don't
But
know why they call it common sense, because in my experience, it's not very common, is it?
no,
But yeah, but I get what you mean. So I think there's got to be some judgment call in this, but like you say, don't overcomplicate it. Did they hit their targets? Yes, they're in the middle box. If they didn't hit their targets, they're to the left on performance. And then if they exceeded their targets, they're on the right of performance. Now, let's stop for a second and go, what does exceeded mean?
well, is it by one? Is it by 10? Or is it about the fact that I did my target and I contributed in other ways?
And that for me is the description I would use. So I always think of exceeded is I did what I was asked to do and I delivered something substantial. And that's where it gets really interesting, because you then end up in some really interesting debates with managers. You've probably been in them. I definitely have, where they go, well, they didn't hit their target. They didn't hit what we were paying them to do. That they're miles off on that. But they got involved in this project over here that's amazing. What box are they in? Because I think they should be in the right-hand side. I think they've overachieved because of this project. And I would argue they didn't.
Well, 101, did you do what we pay you for?
Yeah. Now, the challenge to this very often is what the manager really means is I changed the target halfway through the year, but I didn't write it down. I didn't agree it with everybody. I moved the goalposts. We did it in the corridor over a cup of coffee. They're now arguing, hang on, I did what you asked. And I'm kind of arguing, well, you didn't build your widgets or whatever it was you're supposed to have done. And that's where I think at the heart of all this, you play in this expectation game, because performance is a judgment against an expectation, i.e., the objectives that you set last year.
Yes.
And if you got that bit wrong, this is a really difficult conversation.
Well, and like you say, if it's changed, if if we've moved or changed the direction of travel halfway through the year or partway through the year, then is that on them? Is that on us? And I think this expectation piece is really important, because if we have ambiguity between us, who's that on?
It's got to be on the manager,
I agree.
because it's the job of the most senior person to create the clarity. That's your role.
Well, and more importantly, you have not only to make sure it's clear, but also make sure what they're working on is adding value to the bigger purpose that we're trying to achieve here. Not just busy fools doing stuff and being, potentially good, bad, or indifferent at it, but actually it's about those two metrics, if you like. Is what they're doing adding value to the greater good, and are they doing it to the required standard and
Yes. Yes.
quantity, if there is a quantity element to it?
And when you've got that defined, overperformance needs to be over and on top of the day job, not instead of the day job.
Yes.
And if that means that you get to the half year and the goals need to change because the world has changed and you need a person to focus on something slightly different, there's nothing stopping you redefining your goals. They're
Yeah.
not they're not
Just
tablets of
document it.
stones. Yeah. And I appreciate in some organizations, the processes make it a little bit more complex, a little bit more challenging to be able to do that. But there's nothing really anywhere I've come across that would make it impossible to do that. It just needs a bit of thought.
Well, and a commitment to the process that says, let's sit down and discuss your goals.
Yeah,
Let's sit down and discuss why this is important and why this is now more important than what you were working on yesterday.
exactly. Where do you think? So if you got that sort of now
Oh, you're going to
grid
ask me
that
where I sit on this now, aren't you?
no, I wasn't actually. I don't want to. I don't know because we need to keep these podcasts to a reasonably short length.
Oh,
Um,
gosh, yeah, yeah.
but you go. Where do you think most people should be? Do you think if you looked at an average division of an organization, where would you expect most people to be? Be in column one, the left hand side, underperforming, column two, performing, or column three, the right hand side, overperforming?
My sense is if you take the traditional bell curve, you'd kind of want the majority in the middle.
Exactly. You want most people to be performing. Now, where do most people think they should be? They should be on the right. It's not a bell curve. It's kind of a very skewed, sort of bumpy hill. It looks more like a ski ramp that that most organisations have because everybody wants to be in the right hand side. They want to be in the best position, often because that's where we think pay rises are.
Well, yes, and labels that you don't want to be considered, what and the language they often use in that bottom middle is average. And just the language of bottom suggests that, well, I'm not good then. We create this perception around what the label actually means when what we've just said is you're doing a good job.
Yes,
You're doing what we've asked and you're doing it well.
yes. And for me, another big challenge I see with this model is where managers put people on the right hand side overperforming, and that becomes the expectation. So year in year, people expect to be graded as I'm better than average, and you go, that's a really tough gig then.
Well, it is, but it comes full circle back to that expectations conversation that says, "Here's what we expect of you, and here's why."
Yeah,
And therefore, if you want to play in that box, that's absolutely fine. But it looks like this.
yes, and for me, then you get the expectation bit right. You have the opportunity to then promote people. Give people extra duties, extra bonus payments for certain things. But what you're really doing is going as you work up the organization, we reset the expectation. We've promoted you into a new big role. In the first year, we'll give you a slightly lower expectation because you're brand new and you're learning the job.
Yes,
If you hit that okay, next year we'll go back to a normal expectation. Actually, if you're up for promotion to be a senior, we might in the third year up the expectation again. And if you hit that again, then you're probably ready to be promoted. And we play this cycle out where the expectation is the thing that's moving, not this desire to be seen as overperforming year on year out.
it is probably unlikely for most people to be promoted and suddenly be overperforming in that new role. It takes time
Yeah.
to step into that those new shoes, and new expectations. There's a steep learning curve probably, and different requirements of the role than where you were before you were promoted.
Yes. And therefore you could have somebody who is top talent who on some years would look like they're underperforming because actually we've moved them into a job that's much, much bigger than them and they need a period of time to adjust. And that's fine. We're not saying you're a bad person. We're saying you're learning and you're growing.
Which is what we need for the future.
The question would be if actually when we put them into a role where they're in the left hand side of underperforming year on year, then potentially we've over promoted them or underdeveloped them.
Okay, so we've talked about the bottom rung.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the middle rung. Or did you want to go slightly different?
We've talked across the chart. I want to go up the side now. I want to
Oh, you're going up.
do the up axis. Right. So we know what a cross looks like, performance, sorry. And that's a measure of how you're doing today.
You've just give it away then, haven't you?
Yeah. The up well, we did say it was performance by potential. It's like if they were listening, they already knew that. So
Yeah.
the up axis is potential.
If they were listening.
And potential is really talking about the ability to be, to grow into where we're going. And I think the way I look at this People, again, is not to look at this as like middle people have potential, people on the bottom rung have no potential, people above them have lots of potential. It's the bottom rung is they are that person is very aligned to where we are today, but possibly isn't growing with us. The middle rung is that person is aligned to where we are today and is growing with the organization. And the top rung is they're aligned to where we are today and exceeds the growth of the organization, i.e., is probably ready for something bigger.
So that's interesting. So are we saying then that both, um, well, potential in particular is about both the organization and the individual?
Yes, because it's a fit thing, isn't it? It's potential for us. Right. The reality is, I mean, again, it goes back to I always remember the stuff from years and years ago, the sort of GE Jack Welch idea of moving out the bottom 10%. And in his book, and I can't remember which his book was, but in one of the books he talks about it's not about saying the bottom 10% are bad. It's about saying the bottom 10% are in the wrong place. And it's not uncommon for somebody in the bottom 10% here to go somewhere else and be a star performer because it's about fit and experience and skills and using what that person's got to the role. And so, actually this idea that you know you have no potential, you're rubbish. It's a naive idea. Everybody has potential. It's about are you in the right place, doing the right things with the right people against your ambitions and their ambitions. If that makes sense.
Yes. And but you could easily see how using the Jack Welsh analogy that you've talked about is you could easily see that becoming weaponized, which I think is where
I think it did.
absolutely. And I worked in financial services where that was used as a motivation,
Yeah.
and I use the term loosely, by the way, tool that goes, make sure you're not in the bottom 10%.
And I think that was, if somebody sort of says to me about that, should we get rid of the bottom 10%? That's my main objection to the argument. Because, well, firstly, if you're really going to do that, are your managers going to be honest about the bottom 10%? Because it's very easy if you don't use performance and potential properly to put the people you don't like. We're back to that original question. Do I like you question?
Yes.
I can now put all the people I don't like in the bottom 10% and I get rid of them. You could inadvertently be dooming the organization to groupthink and people who are all the same because managers just use it as a way of getting rid of the people that you should have never got rid of in the first place.
Certainly in my experience, it was about ego. It was about all of those totally inappropriate behaviors of overly competitive, to the point it became destructive within the organization, not constructive. Going, right, how do we help people to realize potential as opposed to just, right, it's dog eat dog, and we're going to find a way to make sure I'm not in that bottom 10% because I know what comes with that.
Yeah. But the other side of it, and let's go back to the 9-box grid. If you're saying this is a person who is in the bottom left-hand corner, so in essence, we're saying they are not delivering on the targets you're setting them. We're going to assume, for the sake of this argument, that you've done that properly and the targets are real and achievable and right, but they're not delivering on them. And as a potential, they're not showing any ability to grow with the organization. They're not going to be part of the future of the organization. At that point, you are really saying this person is the wrong person for you, for your organization. They don't fit, they're not delivering, they're not adding anything to the organization. That has to be a clear management issue. Got to do something about that.
And that's just about having an adult conversation, right? That's just
Yeah.
about going,
Yeah.
is this an attitudinal question, i.e., I'm not sure I want to, or is it a actually, let's find a more suitable role for you, whether that's inside or outside the organization?
It could be fit. I can think of another scenario which I've dealt with in the last few years where somebody went from being in that bottom box, so bottom left, to almost top right. They almost kind of transcended the whole thing. And the thing that happened was change of manager.
Oh,
So it wasn't about them at all. It was about the person they were working for,
yeah.
and put them under the right manager. And that person became a superstar and shone, absolutely shone. but for whatever reason, under the person they're working before, they didn't have the clarity, they didn't know what they were expected of them, they didn't know what right looked like, and they underperformed. So there's a whole number of reasons why somebody's going to end up in a box. The point of a 9-box grid isn't to divide your people up, to put them in little pens so you know how to deal with them. It's to enable you to have the conversation about how do I best manage this person to become a talented contribution to this organization. And very occasionally, just very occasionally, that might be actually this person needs to not be here or not in this role.
Yeah, and I think for me, that's always about, can we look ourselves in the mirror and say that we've done everything we can to manage this person in, i.e., create an environment where they can flourish.
Yeah.
And if we can look them in the mirror, look ourselves in the mirror and say that, then actually we've done all we can and it's on them.
Yes. And so again, you've got these three parameters, kind of, no real potential to grow, have outgrown what we're asking of them now. That's up the side.
Okay.
Where would you think most people should be?
Well, again, I would probably say in the middle.
Exactly. So when you're doing this, a healthy, balanced 9-box grid, in reality, the majority of your people, assuming you don't have three people, but in a large organization, the majority of employees are probably going to end up somewhere in the middle. If you've got all the factors around it, like expectation setting and targeting and clarity, if you've got all that stuff right, what you've got is a group of people who year on year do what we need them to do and grow with the organization. That's what we're growing for. You're going to have some people in the bottom row who are hitting performance, hitting their targets, maybe even delivering more than their targets, but aren't probably going to grow with the organization. And you then have to decide at what point that becomes an issue for you, if ever, because it might be they're doing just fine. 62, hits his targets, great sales guy, customers love him, wants to carry on what he's doing. He's got 3 years till he retires. Leave him alone. On the other hand, somebody who's in a key position, yeah, again, it's like, I think of another example where we've been through this, and they sort of identified they got somebody who was consistently hitting their targets, had no long-term potential, didn't think was going to be with the organization, over the next number of years, owning one of their key strategic projects. And you go, well, okay, I get you. You don't really want to get rid of this person. They're a good, solid performer, but are they the right person to own strategy?
Hmm.
Just a question.
Interesting. So just um, for my clarity, then, what we're saying is we see middle from a potential standpoint as kind of where we would see most people,
Yes.
and we would see middle on the performance axis as kind of where we would want to see most people,
Yeah.
which kind of sits them, if I understand the grid properly, slap bang in the middle of the grid.
Yeah, and on there are, as we said earlier, there are loads of different versions of this grid. If you Google 9-box grid, if you've never come across it before, you're going to find lots and lots of different images, with lots of different wording. But it will be something along the lines of a core player, a core talent, a core employee
Yeah.
in that middle box. These are your key people who turn up every day and do the work and do a good, you know, and it's not good. They do an excellent job. They deliver exactly what you've asked of them, and they're growing with your organization. And you can't expect any more than that. That's what we want from people. You've got a group of people, it's sort of bottom left, where they're underperforming and they have no real potential to grow with the organization, where you're going, for some reason, they're either in the wrong job or they're a bad hire. And that's typically the kind of language. And there's some sort of management type stuff to do. And then you've got a group of people kind of top right, where they're your superstars. And they're equally as demanding on you, because if they're in the top right, if they're in that, particularly if they're in that overperforming, potential is higher than what we need, what we're asking of them right now, you've got to work out how you keep hold of them.
Yes, because they might be growing quicker than you are.
Yeah.
The opportunities might not be big enough, interesting enough, exciting enough for them in the short term. But actually, by having that purpose conversation about where we're going and what makes this important and compelling, might be the secret to keeping them interested for long enough for you to catch them up.
Exactly. And I think, I mean, and then you sort of look at the other two corners, which is sort of bottom, I guess, bottom right. So overperforming but low potential, and we're back to that. Well, get out of their way. Do what you need to do to allow them to keep doing what they're doing. At some point, the world will move on and they may not keep up with it, and you'll have a different conversation. And in reality, they will probably drift from overperforming to underperforming as that happens.
So
But you,
resist the temptation to force them in a particular direction. To your 62-year-old sales guy that was doing just a great job. You're not necessarily wanting to have the potential conversation with him if he's happy where he is and doing what he needs to do and
yeah,
seeing
and
seeing
and
out his kind of final few years before he goes onto the golf course.
And for me, it was about understanding the rate of change in the organization. And what a lot of my peers were doing was looking at the rate of change for them because they wanted to be in the star box. They wanted to be top right. They wanted to be onto the next job and the next, promoted up. They were seeing it through that lens, not his lens.
Yes.
But when you step back and look at it across the whole organization, was the way that we sold and the customer base and the structure that we worked in, was that going to last for over 3 years? Yeah, it was. We just reorganized. We'd probably got a 3 or 5 year cycle before we were reorganized again. He was going to outlive that organizational change. So why rock the boat? Why do anything about that? He's a workhorse. He's just getting on with stuff, and that for me meant I had to accept a couple of peculiar behaviors,
Yeah.
but they weren't terrible. They were just
Are we talking about you or him now? Just
probably both. To be fair, right? So let's go the other opposite corner then. So let's go underperforming with really high potential. What's your reaction to that?
Well, this might be that person we talked about earlier that's, that we've just promoted. We've just put into a new position. They're finding their feet, perhaps not at the required level yet, but actually is showing all the hallmarks of a star of the future, or certainly somebody with high potential.
Yeah, and in a lot of them, if you Google the models, occasionally you'll see this person called an underachiever, but a lot of the models use the label enigma, which I love. Which is if somebody's in that box, if this person's got huge potential and they're underperforming, you got to ask yourself why. What is it I need to do as a leader to sort that out? And it might just be, as you said, well, they're new in the role. What I need to do is just support them and give them time, and they'll get there. But it might be that they're in the wrong job. That you've given them a role that isn't suitable for their personality. You've got a big picture person, and this role is dependent on detail, or vice versa. Those kind of things play out.
Well, one of the boxes I've seen recently for that top left-hand box is potential gem.
Yeah, that's a really nice name for it.
So that would probably lean more towards my example of that. You know, they're on a trajectory. They're just at the early stages of their new level, as it were, as opposed to whereas Enigma probably aptly describes, as you said, somebody who's got all the potential, understands where we're going, but just hasn't found their niche in terms of the organization or niche, depending on where you come from in the world.
And so I think it all comes back to this tool is a really useful tool for a debate, for a conversation to help you understand something, assuming that you can have a realistic understanding of the reality of potential and the reality of performance, and that gets lost. I can think of managers I've worked with in the past who get mixed up between performance and potential. This person delivers a huge amount for me right now. They're my superstar. They're my best performing whatever. Therefore, they must have huge potential. Well, maybe they do, maybe they don't. It's not the same question.
Yes.
These are
And I think that kind of plays out in terms of perhaps some of the tips that we would give here is don't overplay performance or don't overestimate or overrate their performance. In the same way,
yeah,
just because they're a performer, like you've just said, don't overplay their potential.
yes.
Decouple them in terms
These
of
are two separate things, and it's perfectly okay if you've got a high potential person who's not delivering, because it raises a different set of questions than a really successful person who doesn't want to go anywhere.
Yes.
Again, I think of another scenario I've come across several times doing the work we do, where somebody's been in that bottom right hand corner, so over delivering with zero potential, and you look at it and you go, it's their personal life, it's they're caring for a sick parent, or they've just had a child, or something is going on outside of work at this point in time that means they're not investing and growing, they're just turning up, working really hard at the bit they already know, and going home again.
Yeah. Support them, get out of the way. When they're back in the game,
Exactly.
in terms of the potential game, that is not
Yeah.
necessarily the work game, then at that point, bring them back in.
And understand that comes back to understanding that some of this is about the person,
Yes.
some of this is about the fit in the organization and the environment, and some of this is about the rest of their life. And you've got these lots of factors that playing into where they're going to end up in this box. Don't assume that if you're in the top right, they're a great person. If they're in the bottom left, they're a terrible person. That's not what this is telling you.
No. So, last couple of tips then. I suppose one of the things that's really important here is because we're really good at kidding ourselves, we're really subject to bias.
Yeah.
We can see people through the right lens. We use the halo effect, which means we attribute everything good about them to other parts of them, and obviously conversely, we may be subject to the horn effect that says everything we identify something that's bad about them and then project that over everything else about them, neither of which is true.
Or helpful.
Definitely not helpful. So, way to mitigate this perhaps is to calibrate with your peers to make sure that there's some robust assessment that says we all see the world in a similar way. We all understand the rules of the game in terms of using this model, and therefore we're not subject to perhaps some of those biases where we overstate performance or we overstate potential, or both,
Yes.
and therefore give uh, an incorrect view or picture of a particular individual.
And I've facilitated some of those sessions for leadership teams where we've just stuck the grid up and we've just gone through everybody and just go, look, justify, the performance thing, justify the potential. The rest of the team, ask questions. You know this person, you know what they've done. Play devil's advocate a little bit with it. If only because then when you get to the end of it, even if nobody's moved, you've done it properly. You've got a robust and valid assessment. But don't be surprised if people move around the grid, because every time I've done it, at least one or two people move around the grid when you start asking questions because of this bias between I need this person's performance, I don't want to upset them on potential.
Yeah.
Or I really like this person's potential, I'm tolerating the performance.
You're going to create a right problem for yourself down the line, aren't you?
Yeah. And for me, the last tip is all of this started a year ago when you set the expectation. If you set good, challenging, Goldilocks zones, goals, not too hard, not too easy, people have real clarity of expectation, then when you come to have this conversation, it's really easy. If you got that bit wrong, it's a lot harder because it's very subjective.
Next time on The Question Is.
You have a responsibility as a leader and as a manager to know your people. Now, if you're a leader in charge of thousands of people, that might be a little bit more challenging, but certainly those that report directly to you, you need to know more about them. You need to take an interest in them in order to recognize when things aren't quite right.
To find out how Thinking Focus can unlock the potential within your organization, go to www.thinkingfocus.com, where you'll discover more about the work we do, helping our clients increase productivity and enable change.